Welcome to Risk Management for Young People. This is tailored for young people aged in their teenage years, looking for their first job, entering the world of work, or you've just entered the world of work and you're trying to understand some great practices to be safe in your workplace. This will go through a couple of things. One, knowing your responsibilities and understanding the risk management process. We're going to go over identifying hazards, assessing risk, controlling risks, and review and monitoring risks. Some questions for you first to think about as you go into this. What do you consider unsafe work? Would you climb on a roof without a harness? Do you mow the lawn without your sunnies on or in your flip-flops? Do you put gloves on when you're dyeing your hair? Do you put sunscreen on when you're outside in summer? All of these things are a very simple lifestyle, but safety becomes a habit. And the biggest thing you'll find for you to be safe at work, you'll also start to be safer at home. First of all, knowing your responsibilities. When you go into a workplace, what are you responsible for? Your responsibilities take reasonable care for your health and safety. This is so critical, but you are responsible for your actions in that workplace. You don't endanger other people through your actions, and you follow the reasonable instructions and policies. You do those three things, you covered your responsibilities. Your rights is that you can say stop. I feel unsafe in this workplace or in that action, or I'm not trained. You can say no. Okay? You need to be able to raise health and safety concerns. And also in your workplace, there's usually someone who is that health and safety representative. So know that you can always say no if you feel unsafe. Your employer's responsibilities is provide a safe work environment, provide training, okay, talk with you about health and safety, and appoint safety representatives. Those three things, between knowing your responsibilities, knowing your rights, and then your employer's responsibilities, when they work together, you end up with safer workplaces. Let's go through managing risks in the workplace. We're going to look at 4 areas: identifying hazards, assessing risk, control risks, review control measures. These 4 create a bit of a cycle for you, and you'll find these on all sorts of websites and communications and things like that, but they become the process for managing risk in workplaces. First of all, identifying hazards. Okay, a hazard is a source or a situation with the potential for harm. Okay, let's just pause there. The potential for harm. Okay, it can be human injury, damage to property, damage to environment, or a combination of these. Human injury can be physical, it can be mental. We'll often think about psychosocial health. Okay, that's a key term you'll hear thrown around as well as your physical health. Okay, so some questions we might do, we're going to do a job. What could hurt me? What's going on around me? Is there any machinery in this place? Is there any chemicals in this place? What noises are here? Is there dust? Are there things that could fly into my eye? All these things become questions that you need to start asking every time you go to do a job in a task. Okay, so get familiar with asking these questions. This is the habit that you have to create. What documents might there be? Now, in workplaces, you would think that most places would have documentation that says you're going to do this task. People have done it before you. We have a safe way of doing that. And they call it a safe work method statement, or SWMS. You might hear that term. Okay, so they might be in a guide or a policy or a procedure. They'll be in there in smaller companies, but in your larger companies, you'll have SWMS. They're commonly known as. And you want to be able to read those and get familiar with those if you're in a larger company. If you're in a smaller company, you might just ask if there's a guide or there's a procedure book in how those activities are to be conducted. Okay, tools you might use to assess risk is, they call them JSAs. Okay, so the job safety analysis, another term to throw into your world. Take 5s. Okay, little checklists. They're little booklets that some workplaces use. Before you go do a task, do a take 5. Okay, so what they're saying is take 5 minutes just to look at what could impact you. Okay, and some places just have workplace observation booklets or sheets in what you do. Types of hazards. Okay, so environmental, what's going on around you. Okay, what's the air, what's the temperature, all those things that are in your environment that you're working. Okay, ergonomic. Okay, so sitting, lifting, twisting, stretching, all those things to do with repeated tasks, those sort of things that affect your body positioning. Okay, types of hazards, we're talking about wet floors, physical, okay, so electrical cables, things in the way, steps, rubbish around the work site, whatever it might be, what could be there, okay? Psychological, all right? So things that start to impact your own stress. That can be people, got a nice little image here of that really bad boss, but there's some good bosses out there as well. But you might be claustrophobic, you might be in small spaces, that's why I've got tunnels in there, and at heights, and what is happening that's causing you a psychological stress in that space. Biological, viruses, toxins, those sort of things that happen in your environment. Okay, radiation. Okay, so what can be coming off chemicals, machinery. We often in heavy industries can deal with things to the simple things as just sunburn. All right, we forget that the sun can burn and really affect our skin. Substances. All right, so what are you playing with? Fuels, vapors. What are those things that you will be touching, that you need to be covering your mouth and your hair and your body and your hands? Okay, make sure that you've got right things in place. Okay, and body stress. Okay, we're talking about those manual handling, those constant interactions with what your work's going to be like. You might be sitting all day in a forklift. Okay, you might be working on a building site. You might be in a hairdressing salon. Whatever it might be, you're going to have those repeated tasks that start to really impact your body. Okay, so let's talk about assessing the risk. We've identified a hazard. All right, so the risk is the chance of something happening that will have a negative effect. Okay, that's the type of risk we're talking about right now. We're not talking about the broad aspects of life risk, because sometimes it's good to take risk in life. And some risks have a positive effect if done well. But in a workplace, in this context, we're talking about those things that will have a negative effect. And the level of the risks there's 2 words here. Likelihood. Okay, so how likely is that event going to happen? And what is the potential consequence of that unwanted event? Okay, so that's what we're going to get familiar with, likelihood and consequence. So we're going to do something, we're going to do a task. Okay, we're going to cross a road. Let's use that as an example. We're going to cross the street, not at the crossing. There are cars there. It's high traffic. How likely are you to be hit? If there's lots of cars, the likelihood is high. Okay. If those cars are going at 100 k's an hour, what are the potential consequences? Well, they could be quite catastrophic. Okay, so we need to be thinking through what is that likelihood and what is the consequence. But if we were to cross that same road in the middle of nowhere, and there's a car that goes past every 3 hours, okay, the likelihood is much lower. Consequence could still be quite high, okay, but the likelihood is lower, and that reduces that risk. Okay, that's a simple activity. You're going to do lots of these in your workplace. Okay, likelihood, consequence, and you'll often see a table like this somewhere in your risk assessment process. Okay, consequence will have a rating of insignificant to catastrophic. Okay, and likelihood would be almost certain to rare. Okay, you're going to see forms of this in your workplace, all required to have some sort of risk assessment tool. So as you look at this, if something was unlikely and minor, you're going to see it meets at the green low. Okay. If it is moderate consequence and a possible likelihood, we're going to hit in the high category. Okay. So you're going to learn how to matrix those in many of your workplaces. So get familiar with charts like this in your risk assessment. All right, let's talk about control the risk. Okay, so now we've identified a risk. What are we going to put in place to now reduce that risk? A control measure is something to help prevent you or somebody else from getting hurt. Okay, this is something we're going to do to change that risk. Okay, you're going to see this in a lot of places in your workplace. You're going to think this thing called hierarchy of controls, from the least important, the least valuable at the bottom, to the most effective up the top. Okay, so these get used across all industries in Australia, all right, and in other nations of the world as well, Canada, USA, all right, England. And so as you look at these aspects of hierarchy and controls, get familiar with these 5 levels. Okay. Another way to look at these things is, okay, the level of health and safety protection is the highest when we eliminate the risk. Okay. Back to crossing our road. We don't cross the road. Eliminate it. Okay. If we were to substitute or isolate, okay, or engineering, we might put a crossing, or we might put a bridge over the road. Okay. Okay, so these things become something that then stops us going anywhere near the road. Okay. Administrative controls, that's pretty much your zebra crossings. Okay, just a bit of signage. All right, painted the tarmac, trying to make it look a bit better. Okay, or PPE, wear a helmet. Those sort of things to cross the street. Okay, so how do we manage those things to reduce the effect of that risk, the likelihood and the consequence? Okay. Eliminate the hazard, removing the risk completely. Okay. So you eliminate the risk of falling from height from doing the work at ground level. Okay. You just don't go up there. All right. That's not always doable, but that's one way to do it. Do you have to do the work up on the roof at a high place? Substitute. These controls eliminate as many of the risk associated with the hazard as possible. Okay, so we might swap something out, all right, that reduces the risk as best we can. So different type of paints, different chemicals. Okay. Engineering controls. Engineering controls eliminate as many of the risk associated with the hazard as possible. These controls include, okay, isolating the hazard by physically separating people, rails around edges, those sort of things. Okay, we use things like trolleys to move things and hoists. Okay, safety switches. All right, these things isolate. These things put a physical thing in place to change the level of risk and reduce the effect of harm. Administrative and PPE, these are our 2 lowest. Okay, they still rely on human behaviour. Okay, we might have procedures, rules, warning signs. Okay, and PPE might be earmuffs, our respirators, our eyewear, our safety boots. But really, these are the last line when it comes to the effectiveness of these control measures. Review the controls. So we've done these things. We've identified hazard. Okay, we've identified risks. Okay, we've put control measures in place. But if we don't actually review whether they worked, then we miss the last piece of the cycle. Okay, so we want to review these key tools that we did to see whether or not they actually made sense or actually worked. Okay, so those tools we talked about earlier, those hazard identification forms, those Take 5s or the JSAs, our risk assessment document, our SWIMs, these all become documents which we go back to and review. How did we go? What did we put in place? Did it actually work? Okay, we might have reports called near-miss reports in our workplace. So when an accident, it nearly happens or we're very close to it, a lot of workplaces require you to put a near-miss in, because that starts to indicate things that we're on the edge of. Okay, when we do have an incident, you'll be required to report an incident. Okay, and you want to review that, and you want to be able to go, well, how many incidents have we had this month, and what were they in, and how can we put better things in place to reduce those incidents. First aid reports, those sort of things that come through. We want to review those and find out what's actually happening. What story is it telling? What might we update? Okay, we might start telling our employees. Okay, so you should be finding out those things that are going on and how do we improve our workplace. There might be a training course you need to go and do. Okay, so these things become part of that review process. And as a new worker, that's part of why you get training. When a new piece of equipment comes out, they might start to say, well, this is to reduce harm in these places, or we're changing the PPE, or we've changed the procedure. So you want to stay alert to some of those updates across your workplace. And where might those updates come out? They might come out in things like your morning meetings. Some industry call them toolbox talks, a weekly staff meeting or a monthly, email notifications, notice boards, signage around the workplace, some of your training. So be attentive to those things. Turn up to your morning meetings and be listening to what's going on. So finally, just a group of websites to really help you understand where some of the resources are here in Australia. So depending on what state you're in, every state has their own work health and safety site. And we have Safe Work Australia, which is a bunch of resources that help across the nation. So whatever state you're in, check it out, click on the link and go to that site, and you'll find resources to help you understand work health and safety. I hope you enjoyed a brief presentation on understanding work health and safety in a better way.